welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, so it's time for our Tuesday Tool House Tool. And today we are um, blessed to have in our presence a new acquaintance of mine. His name is John Ford, and he actually lives in Oakland, California, and works in the field of law. And also has lots of tools and lots of fun experience with mediation. And through our brief conversations prior to this, we discovered that we have a lot of synergy in the work that we do in helping people with conflict resolution and understanding each other. So I shared with John all of the work that I do with helping adults, and now with my book and classroom material and game, children understand the need behind the behavior and learning to be responsive instead of reactive. I was really taken and attracted to the work that he's been doing, which is very similar, and I will let him describe all of that and kind of tell all of you, kind of the path in which he's taken that's led him here. So I introduced him, but I will let him elaborate and speak a little bit more about, like your journey into this work that we are now aligned in.
Thank you, Shawn. It's great to be here with you. I like your emphasis or focus on practicality, on practical tools that help people get along and improve the quality of their relationships. But in terms of, just to give you a little bit of a flavor of me and how I ended up here having this conversation with Shawn, I'm originally from South Africa, and I grew up during the troubled apartheid era, and that sort of motivated me to move towards law because I saw that as a vehicle and a venue that could allow for, I suppose, change in society. But through my practice of law, I discovered mediation. In other words, I just kept discovering that I wasn't a fighter, I was more of a peacemaker. And in 1996, I moved to the United States, and in the United States is where I really, I would say, discovered mediation. And I've been focusing on, although I do have a legal background, I've really been focusing on, as I like to say, swimming upstream away from the courthouse, trying to get to conflicts early rather than when they've escalated. So
Yes.
most of my practice is focused on interpersonal relationships in the workplace, people not getting along. And in the course of my career of doing that, I've been motivated to distill and to find the tools that I thought would be helpful. In other words, instead of, so often when people participate in mediation, it's like they're going through this mystery process and they sort of start at the beginning, they're in conflict and they end up on the other side and they've worked it out, but they didn't learn anything. And I always wanted to make sure that people, when they went through this experience, would actually come out on the other side stronger. And there's been two sort of areas I've focused on. The one has been feelings and needs cards, which I was like saying, if we can acknowledge another human's feelings and needs, we're giving them empathy, but also in the context of conflict resolution, those, in my experience, have been the two key conversations. In other words, firstly, we need to acknowledge a person's feelings, allowing them to be validated because what they're feeling is what they're feeling. We can't argue with that. We can't take that away from them. And then once we've done that, then if we time it right, we can pivot into problem solving. And to problem solve, we need to understand what people's needs are. So that's been the one direction I've gone, is the one tool that I've developed is a set of cards, feelings and needs cards, and that's been fleshed out into a dictionary and also an app. But the other area that I've also focused on was recognizing that in mediation, one of the primary functions of the mediator is to ensure structural balance. In other words, it's not going to be a lopsided conversation where one person does all the talking. Each side has an opportunity of sharing their perspective in an honoring kind of a way. And absent a mediator, what I've often observed is that people struggle with that. And I was back in South Africa and I picked up one of these little giraffe. They actually make them in Maui to write as a little pen. And I thought this would make a great talking stick. And a talking stick, as simple as it is such a powerful communication tool because it helps to clarify who's the speaker and who's the listener, and also helps establish that everyone should have a turn of being the speaker and the listener. So simple as that is, and as much as I love the talking sticks I've created, including this nice fun one that looks like a microphone, it literally can be anything. You could just take a pen on your desk and use that as an indicator of who's the speaker and who's the listener.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many thoughts that I have. So first of all, you know that I, spent years and years in, well, over 3 decades in
Mhm,
Montessori, and then I'm a
mhm,
positive discipline trainer. I also have a master's degree in transformational leadership and coaching.
mhm,
And I love what you said about swimming upstream because it reminded me of, some of the important things that I learned during that training, which was as soon as there's an issue, address it, and I think that
mhm,
I think one of the tendencies of adults and many people
mhm,
is to
mhm,
avoid conflict, and then
mhm,
it grow and then it's like a wound that festers and continues to build up and build up and build up and then explode, where when you're no longer fear, the act of talking to somebody about what's really going on and moving into solution oriented problem solving, then things can really be okay, moving
yeah,
forward. And even if you agree to disagree. So I love that you said that swimming upstream and making sure that you're addressing things as they happen instead of waiting. And then also your work of we're not just solving problems here, but you're working with people and you're giving them tools that they can take into their life forever now, right? Learning how to, and what you said about feelings, because that's a lot of the work that I do. Once you identify your feelings, you know that that person that you're in conflict with is feeling the same way. And so all of a sudden you have a sense of empathy, and then you start to dig deeper and look for the need behind the behavior.
mhm,
What is the coded message underneath this
mhm.
behavior, and how can we respond to each other, so that needs are being met, and then the behavior dissipates.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so those tools, and then the talking stick. So one of the things that we do in positive discipline with the children, and I do it with adults too, is we have classroom meetings, and we introduce the talking stick. We all are in a circle, everybody gets to see each other, and whatever we're talking about, the agenda is generated by the children. And then we pass
Mhm,
the talking stick and everybody shares how they're feeling
mhm,
about whatever,
mhm, mhm,
whatever slip I'm pulling out of the agenda
mhm.
box. And sometimes, it's about a problem in the playground, or sometimes it's about, hey, we never have enough pencils in the classroom, or whatever it is. And everybody has a voice. And I agree with you that talking stick, when somebody's holding the talking stick, it prevents other children from going, ooh, 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 and raising their hand to want to talk. So that
Mhm,
that person has peace, and like being able
mhm.
to express themselves fully and completely. And I always also offer to pass. So everybody gets a turn to hold the stick, but
Right,
some people just pass.
exactly.
Um, and one of the things that we did with the talking stick before we moved into the agenda was compliments and appreciation. So it always starts on a really positive note. And then
Mhm,
we also invited the children to ask for a compliment, if they're having like a yucky day. So I
mm,
agree with you. The talking stick is very powerful, and there's no
mm.
response. The person shares what they're thinking, and unless it's a compliment and maybe a thank you, we
Right,
just
right.
round. And then after everybody says their piece about it, okay, what ideas and suggestions do you have to fix this problem? Then everybody gets a chance. We call it brainstorming.
Brainstorming, yes, 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 yes. Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we role play the situation to make it
Mhm,
lighthearted and fun,
mhm.
and then we brainstorm for solutions, and then they vote on it. So the talking stick, I agree, is very powerful. And you can do all of that in 20 minutes and then be on to the
Seriously,
next,
yeah, yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm having the same reaction that you had, Sean, because of so many things that I wanted to share. Because I was thinking you must be reading my mind in terms of that. What I think of it is that one of the biggest challenges we face is both emotional avoidance, in other words, of avoiding our feelings. And then beyond that, as our life unfolds, not only do we avoid our feelings, we avoid the important conversations that we should be
mhm,
having in our
yeah,
life. In other words, we run away
crucial.
from very crucial conversations because, as hard as it is, no one really likes conflict. But most of the time, when we're experiencing conflict, there's something going on in our life that needs to change. There's a growth point that's waiting sort of to emerge. And the tragedy is when we close ourselves down to the life currents of our feelings, and then also the challenges that we're
Right.
facing in our life, we're missing opportunities. But the other thing, when you said that thing about, the wound festers, when I'm explaining to folks mediation, I always say, like, one of the things we have to be careful about is not cutting to the chase, because people are so uncomfortable with conflict. They'll try to avoid it as much as they can. And then when they can't avoid it, they'll just say, like, okay, let's just cut to the chase and just move. We just like, we don't like it. Let's just focus on solutions. But as you pointed out, there first has to be that round of honoring the just listening to one another's perspectives first,
Mm-hmm.
or you can get into that problem solving. If you just cut to the problem solving without having had that respectful listening, it will fester. So
Mm-hmm.
see what the analogy I often use, I'll say to folks is, imagine you walking outside and you trip and you fall and you puncture your thigh and you realize, oh my, I've got this big puncture wound on my thigh. I need to have stitches. And you get rushed off to the emergency room and you realize they're about to stitch you up, but they haven't cleaned the wound out. You'd be like, hey, wait a minute, like,
Mm-hmm.
please,
Mm-hmm.
I know
Yeah.
that you want to stitch it up, but you got to clean this thing out first. And that's the piece that I see folks missing so often. They just want to cut to the chase and they're so uncomfortable just sitting with their sometimes what we can sometimes describe as those difficult, uncomfortable emotions, and struggle also to acknowledge the emotions of the of the other as a key first step that allows us to move into the problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the clearing and the cleansing. Yeah,
Definitely, yeah, that
is yeah, so important.
well, and what I also what we I think we sometimes almost like overcomplicate things in the sense of that just listening and validating and honoring everyone's different feelings is as simple as it really has to be.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be more complicated than just being present to the other person's experience and acknowledging, wow, you were
Mm-hmm.
disappointed that there weren't pencils, or maybe they were more in the frustrated direction, whatever it may be, just letting them
Right.
have their feelings. That's what I've consistently seen is when I acknowledge and let people have their feelings, I validate them in a deep, strong way. It opens up the space for them. They start
Mm-hmm.
moving, and then they can start. But if you
Yeah.
don't do that, they get stuck.
Yeah.
And that's, as I say, that's been one of my really key insights is the importance of
Yeah.
moving people away from that avoiding and getting into to engaging and having the courage to talk and listen to one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think avoiding the crucial conversations, like you were
Mhm.
saying,
Mhm.
it really stunts our opportunity for rebirth, right?
Right,
Because there is always chaos before a rebirth, and
right,
that's a clue that there's about to be a rebirth.
right.
But you can
Yes.
just totally ignore it and then not have it. And is that what we really want? No, because we want the growth, right? We are
Right,
continually growing until we're no longer here, growing and evolving until
right,
we're no
right.
longer here. Yeah, and you said also validation and acknowledgement.
Mm,
That is
mm,
something that's really important too in the work of positive discipline. So we talk about when we're showing up, right? And
mm,
for children, and I think it's true for adult relations too. Like you want to be predictable, right? You want to
mhm,
you want to show up
mhm.
as predictable so people know what they're going to get.
Right.
And particularly for children, it's really, really important. So we use a kind and firm strategy
Mhm,
where when we're dealing with a situation where, oh, we need a child to transition, from an activity to
mhm,
an activity, or we're wanting something, we always acknowledge and affirm first. I understand that you want to keep working on that. I feel
right.
like that too sometimes. And then we use the word and then we
Mhm,
set the boundary. And we need to move, it's time for playtime or it's time for a class meeting. And that is really, really powerful. And so with people that I coach, I try to get them to journal about that and also focus on the number of times they're using but in their vocabulary rather than
mhm,
and,
mhm.
because
And
but always
mhm.
negates the affirmation and
Right.
the acknowledgement. Yeah, so I love that you shared that as well. And all of this work that we both do,
Mhm, mhm,
really, really, really kind of leans into emotional intelligence, right? The work of emotional intelligence. And I don't think anybody is unaware at this point in our world that EQ is even more important than IQ in terms of, success and fulfillment, in life. So talk a little bit, maybe can we transition into your empathy
mhm.
set and talk a little
Sure.
bit about how how that has been used, how it is being used, how you want to see it being used in terms of supporting emotional intelligence in, in adults and in school settings with children.
Right. I would love to, but I just to sort of just to underscore, I think what you're sort of saying, firstly, of yes, I think the foundation of everything that we're really talking about is emotional intelligence. And to me, the sad reality is, for the most part, that's been a neglected, um, I don't know, skill and sort of an attitude towards life that sort of is only in these more recent sort of years has really come to the fore. Where, like as you say, I think we now know how important
Mm-hmm.
managing our feelings and our emotions is. And yet, and that this to me is again, this the tragedy is that we're still socializing one another to be disconnected. I was like, I'll just quickly share a story, and then I'll share a little bit more about the
Okay,
empathy scenes and the
great.
cards and things like that. But I remember this. My sister, I have a sister who lives in Atlanta. She used to live down in Carlsbad, and one year I was going down to visit, and my nephew Aiden wanted a car carrier. So I was like, as the uncle, I was all excited. I knew what he wanted, and he wanted a red one. So I went online, got the right car carrier, but they only had green ones. So I was like, what do I do? Do I bring it to him or not? And eventually I thought, okay, a green car carrier is better than no car carrier. So I take it down to him, and I get there during the day, and he's playing with it, and he's already pointed out to me that it wasn't the color that he had hoped for. So I can tell that he was disappointed, right? And that was a valid
Yeah.
response to that experience. So later on, his father comes home, my brother-in-law, and I love him. We have a lovely relationship. And he says, "Oh, I see you've got your car carrier." He says, "Yes." And then his son says, "But it's not red." Now, this is the tragedy. And I think, as we all know, like those awkward moments sometimes in family where you're like, good with it. I don't mind that he's disappointed that it's right, that it's green, not
Yeah.
red. But his dad interprets that as he's not being appreciative, he's not being polite.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically gets my poor little nephew to apologize for being rude to me when I'm like,
Yeah. Oh
hello.
my gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that, and I think we all have those, right? Those kind of moments in life
Mm-hmm.
where we've been basically steered away from feeling and being in touch with what we are feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times in the work that I do with, because all the adults were children once, and then you're saying like, what are you feeling? And I used to I would get frustrated as a trainer because I would say, pair people up and I'd have them doing a little listening exercise. So the one person would share something and then the other one would reflect back. And I'd say, see if you can pick up on some of the emotions and reflect back at least two different emotions.
Yeah.
And you'd think that I was asking them to do Mission Impossible. It seemed like
Wow.
the main one that would always come out was frustrated, and they couldn't seem to get. There wasn't much variety, and they were really really limited. And that's when I started using these my feelings and needs cards, and essentially that's what they are. They're just a series of prompts that help people get in touch with their like, oh yeah, yeah, I am feeling. In other words, they hadn't thought about it,
Mm-hmm.
but now they see the word, and that it gets them in touch with what's going on. So again, as simple as that is, ideally, I think we are all more attuned to and in touch with our feeling states, the energy in our bodies, and we can read it and discern what it's telling us and using us to guide us through life. But again, sadly, I think for most of us, at some point in childhood, we were disconnected or told, feelings are dangerous, be careful with them, check them at the front desk, that all that kind of those bad messages that we got that disconnected us from that.
Totally. Yeah.
And then and now everyone's telling us emotional intelligence is important. And we're like, hello, what am I feeling? And that's where people do need
Mm-hmm.
tools to help them get in touch with
Mm-hmm.
their feelings. But again, and I think we could have stopped at just feelings, but I also like both you and me have taken that other step of saying the feelings are important, but then there's somewhere that they need to be able to be taken. And that's where the needs come in as well. But that just like people are disconnected and not in touch with what they're feeling, I found the same with needs. A lot of time people aren't really attuned to what their true needs are either. So
Mm-hmm.
to say the feelings and needs cards, they're essentially tools dedicated to that. One thing, I'll just mention, with the first iteration of them that I came out with, they're just the word, like it'll just say frustrated, jealous,
I saw that.
lonely,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
excited, etc. And then I started getting feedback from folks saying, but there's no definition. And so now I have another version with the definitions. The
Mm,
interesting thing, though, is what I found is I actually prefer the cards without the definitions, because without the definitions, everyone's got their own working,
absolutely.
definition of what it is, and it keeps them, in my experience, more in their heart space. When the folks use the cards with the definitions, I can literally see them going into their analytical headspace of like analyzing it. Am I feeling this and what have you? But
Yeah. And
whatever,
making it
everyone's a little
cognitive
different.
instead of
Exactly,
heart-based.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah. But yeah,
Oh,
that's
sorry,
what
I
I
didn't
say.
mean to
So
interrupt
no,
you
no,
there.
no, 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 no. But I think I was pretty much uh I was done with my talking, done with what I wanted to share, but really just sort of underscoring how important it is, and also how we do. There's no shame in needing some supportive tools to help us get in touch with what we're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then to be able to sometimes, it's like, I think what I've observed with these feelings and needs cards is people are like, whoa, I had no idea that my experience was so much richer than just one simple little emotion. And
Mm-hmm.
then from all of the feelings that they discover that they had, to say, all right, but what is the most important one? If you were to distill them down, what's the most important one? And that process, that sort of an internal sort of reflection analysis, I found
Mm-hmm.
unbelievably powerful and helpful for folks. And then sort of I think what you were picking up on as well is when we realize we're feeling something, they're the mirror neurons, and then we realize the other person, is feeling
Yeah.
it too. But the more that we can create a process where we can both express what we're feeling, but also putting our energy and trying to sense what
Mm-hmm.
others are feeling, and that's happening in a natural way. That's where, at least in my experience, I'll often see truly transformative shifts in relationships, and people
Mm-hmm.
really getting to a better place that they just didn't think was possible before. That simple step of just saying, let's be
Mm-hmm.
true and honest with our feelings and talk about them, validate them, acknowledge them as that foundation for problem
Yeah.
solving.
Yeah. And of course, you've stimulated more thoughts for me
Good.
to share in this conversation. One of the things that when I was in my graduate program for transformational leadership and coaching, one of the things that we had to do was unpack ourselves, right? Because we can't
Mm-hmm.
really support and help people and coach them unless we understand,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the whole, how our matrix were formed,
Mm-hmm.
and then how we want to rematrix, and what do we want our lives to look like? And one of the things, for example, that I found that I learned about myself at that time was that I had, like you said, emotions can be scary, and maybe we're taught that they're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're given those messages as children. And so I think at that point when I started the program, my safety, where I felt safe was in cognitive intellectual exchange, right? So I had to work really hard in terms of balancing that intellectual cognitive
Mm-hmm.
space and my heart, and my emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really, really interesting because we only focused on five emotions. Um, with the mindset that other emotions are subsets, right? So fear,
Mm-hmm.
hurt, anger, sadness, joy. Fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy. And so regularly during our, classes or whatever, the chancellor would say, "Okay, everybody stop. Where are you? Fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy." Because we would be doing work that was really
Mm-hmm.
confronting. And you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I didn't really even know.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Now I learned to be more in
Mm-hmm.
touch with that,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought it was really great. I did a positive discipline training in Houston recently, and we were talking about this. And one of the teachers came up with a great idea. She said, "I'm going to put a big chart up with all the children's names and little nuggets, little coins or circular coins with fear, hurt,
Mm-hmm.
lots of fear, hurt, sadness, joy, and Velcro." And so all throughout the day, the child can go and find and put it up there.
There
Um,
you go.
and you don't have to address the emotions right away, but it's designed to help them be in touch with their
Right,
emotions.
right.
I thought that that was an amazing idea.
I
Um,
think so too.
and
Well, I
then the
think what you're,
conflict resolution. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, because really what you're talking about is that emotional literacy, just creating practices and putting our attention on valuing people's feelings. And like you say, sometimes, like I always just sort of like a couple of my simple little ones is to say, like, well, if you're feeling tired, you probably need rest. If you're feeling confused, you're going to look for clarity. So oftentimes the feelings are giving us those clues to what we're needing, but sometimes just knowing that I've been heard, that I've been seen
Mhm.
and acknowledged for what I am feeling can be soothing and comforting
Yeah.
in and of itself.
Yeah. And I think that the responsiveness that we've been talking about, responding to the need rather than reacting to behavior can be a little
Mm-hmm.
counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Like when a child is hurting
Right,
and they're saying, I hate you, and they're kicking you or throwing stuff at you or spitting, our tendency is to be, that's not acceptable, go to your room, or
right,
go to the principal's office or whatever, when really what they need is for just somebody to say, I see that you're hurting. I'm sorry,
right,
or would you like a hug? And that is so much more effective in terms of calming them down, but
right.
also like narrowing that canyon between the two people,
Ex-
than it is to get angry, but which is our tendency. And the same thing with attention, like negative attention seekers when they're not seeking negative attention, we're like, oh, thank God, that
Mm-hmm.
child's that
Mm-hmm.
being good over there. My mom used to
Mm-hmm.
say that, don't bother your brother, he's being good. But really, when they're not seeking negative attention is when, that coded message is notice me, involve me. And
Right,
so when
right.
they're not seeking negative attention, you want to invite them to help you with something or do something with you. And then all of a sudden the negative attention seeking goes away. So that was another thought that I had as you were speaking
Yeah, no,
is
no, well,
being
again, I'm having the
responsive
same
can,
reaction
yeah. Hmm.
to what, as you're sharing things. Yeah, I keep thinking of things too. But I mean, yeah,
And the
the more
conflict
we,
resolution, like
hmm
we make it a priority in our Montessori classrooms to bring children together when they have an altercation, if they don't do it on their own,
hmm
and have
hmm
each one speak, you
hmm
know, this
hmm
is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I
hmm
need, this is what I want, this is what I think will make things better. And sometimes they agree to disagree, and sometimes they come up with a solution. Um, but we never force a child to apologize. If
right.
if
Oh,
if he or she
okay.
does it all, organically, that's different. But one of the tools that I also, in positive discipline found helpful is giving them tools. So
hmm
instead of saying, you're, I'm sorry, I slapped you that and it hurt. Instead
hmm
of I slapped you and I see that it hurts you. I'm sorry. So the sorry comes
uh,
at the end,
the
so they
end,
take
right?
it,
Yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
take accountability. And then they're always using I statements, and it's never you made me feel. It's always
Right,
I
right,
feel. Nobody makes
right,
anybody feel
right,
anything.
right,
So
right,
we
right, right.
train, for lack of a better word, we train the children on how to engage in these conversations from a very young age so that they have these great skills, as they become adults. And the other tool that we give them, and I love this, I think it can work with adults
Mm-hmm.
too, is bugs and wishes.
Say it
It
again. Hi.
it's called bugs and wishes. And in the little
Uh,
piece area of the classroom, we may have a bug and like a fairy wand. And they can go in there independently with each other. And the child will say, it bugs me when, and I wish. It bugs me when you interrupt my work, and I wish you could
yeah,
leave
yeah.
me, you know, anyway, just some, tools like that I think are really powerful.
Well, but again, what I love, and it's so lovely hearing what you're describing, Sean, because you're really sort of creating and training the future generation of grown-ups, so that there's a chance that those children that are going through an experience like what you're describing, where they're, that, like as you said, they're not told to say they're sorry when they're not. Just think of how traumatizing and confusing that is for a child,
Mm-hmm.
or being bugged by something and having nowhere to take that. Because I think you're right. When people don't have anywhere to take their unmet needs, they come out in unproductive strategies. And the most
Yeah.
unproductive strategy is violence. In other words, where people use violence as a way of getting what they actually
Mm-hmm.
need. But in the absence of a sort of a structure where people are being trained and nurtured to connect with their feelings and express them in healthy ways, use I statements. Like you say, the minute there's a little bit of a rupture in a relationship, the staff don't look the other way and think, oh, they'll probably be all right. You bring them together. So you're role modeling the new norm of what it looks like to
Yeah.
interact with other humans from an emotionally intelligent point of view. So that'll just be the way they'll
Mm-hmm.
go forward. And I
Yeah.
think part of our challenge, though, is is that reality of saying that's great to see these new cohorts of children, the lucky ones maybe that are getting into schools where they're getting this kind of nurturing. And then they're also going to get into the world out there where some folks will have that and a lot still won't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that
Mm-hmm.
also becomes a challenge. Is like sometimes it's great when you get into a conflict with someone else that you can use good communication practices and listen with one another. And then it gets really hard where you have to also, like, you're feeling like I'm being this bigger person and this other person isn't able to necessarily meet me. Like as you're saying, they
Right.
stay
That's so
focused on the
true.
behavior, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that becomes hard.
That's so true because I have three children, and my older
Hmm.
two went from Montessori from toddler all the way through eighth grade. So they transitioned into high school where, I think high school is much different, a much, well, it's a much different environment than a middle school,
Right,
public middle
right.
school, which my youngest son transitioned because of where we were living and what was available. He transitioned to public school in seventh grade. So he was
Hmm.
there for seventh and eighth grade after being in a Montessori environment where we have, where he was allowed to
Right,
exercise all of these tools and express how he felt and feel. Anyway, he came home after the first week and said, I don't think I'm going to like this. And I said, Oh, why? And he said, I don't feel like an individual. And then
uh,
he said, The teachers are mad.
right,
And the children are this, what did he say? The students are checked out.
right,
Yeah. And that was an insight from a seventh grader, having been in
right.
Montessori. So, and then he was explaining, he was giving examples of, there's this bell that rings at a certain time during the day, and I guess it was recess, and he goes, and they're just herding us out this big door like as quickly as they
Yeah, yeah,
can,
yeah,
and we're
yeah,
out in a parking lot with nothing to do. It's not for us.
yeah.
Yeah, and but nobody's allowed to, they don't have any voice. So
Right, right.
I thought that was so interesting. So yeah, it's true. Um, how can we, continue this work so that we're providing it for children and adults at the same time, and like positive discipline. Now we have something called empowering people in the workplace, which
Hmm.
is a lot of the same tools that we provide for students, but at a more sophisticated level, so that workplaces can become places where people feel heard and
Right.
respected.
Just
And
if I can comment on that, because one of what I've seen consistently is one of the trickiest intersections. This is now in the workplace, are those moments when say a supervisor needs to give another, let's say, an employee feedback, and really what they're trying to do is saying, like, here's the path that I want you to walk on, and if I see
yeah,
you deviating from the path, they want to try to get you back. But instead of people being able to receive that as being helpful guidance and support, they perceive it as an attack, as a threat.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then talk about, remember you mentioned a little earlier about how to sort of move away from reactivity into responsiveness. And now that you've just threatened me, my job's on the line, and they get defensive, and basically all hell breaks loose. But that intersection, which I think it shows up in all aspects of life. In other words, whether it's a boss telling us what to do, can be a friend telling us, "Hey, I don't like it when you do this," or colleague, doesn't matter. But
yeah,
anytime we receive feedback, it seems like most of us are primed to get defensive and to perceive it as a threat. And so giving
absolutely.
people both the skills to receive it, but then also, and I think this is where your positive discipline comes in, is how can we honor that human being, separate the problem from the person? You're a good person,
Mm-hmm,
and there's this behavior that we want to address
yeah.
in a way that leaves them intact rather than feeling like they've been literally attacked and sort of put down.
Yeah, one of the tools I found helpful with that, it doesn't always work, but
Mm,
but I is asking curiosity questions,
right,
so that they're actually coming to the conclusion of, oh yeah, oh I noticed, like the process call, right?
right, right, right.
I noticed that, when we gather for staff meetings at 4 o'clock, 75% of the time you're not there,
Hmm.
or whatever the
Right,
issue.
right, 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 right. No, exactly.
Tell me more about that, and then, oh, well, how does that make you feel? Do you feel informed? Like asking them questions about the
Right. No,
content
no.
of the meeting. How are you getting the information? Oh, Yeah.
Right,
How do
right.
you think your colleagues might feel since, that they're always there and you're
Hmm.
not,
Hmm.
whatever. And then
Hmm.
letting them come to their own conclusions. I think if you can make that happen, I think that's oftentimes helpful. And
Definitely. Well,
with
again, you're
children.
describing to my mind, you're describing the emotionally intelligent leader. And as they
Hmm.
always say, the main number one reason why people leave companies is because of a bad boss. So when you don't have that, it doesn't feel good. And even if you wanted to be open and more revealing and vulnerable about why you maybe aren't coming to those meetings, if your boss starts off in a way of attacking, then it's very hard for you to not to be defensive and to
Right.
go down a bad path. But
And
yeah,
not feel safe. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I think that these tools that you've created, again, they align a lot with,
Hmm.
tools that I've used
Hmm.
and strategies that I teach parents and educators. How I'm sure that there's many people listening to this podcast that are interested in exploring and learning more about your tools. How can they find your information and how can they find
Good.
the empathy set?
Thank you, Sean. Well, the easiest way is to go to empathyset.com. So at Empathy Set, you'll find information about the cards, both the definitions version and the one without the definitions, the dictionary, and then also access to the app. I wanted to
Mm.
mention the app also includes um, sort of a field where you can journal. So if you wanted to do some journaling,
Ooh,
you can do that. And it also has I statement tools so that you can start
oh, I
practicing
statements.
creating I
Mm.
statements for yourself. But in any event, they're all available at empathyset.com. And you'll also find there a link to, if you wanted just to play around with it on the web, there's a web-based version of the app. And that's also where you'll find the talking sticks, the colorful
Talking
one, the more
sticks.
celebratory one,
Yay.
and the giraffe. As they say, the giraffe has a big heart because it's
Yeah.
got to pump the blood up that long neck.
Yeah. Oh, this
Yeah.
is amazing. Well, I hope we can stay in touch
Thank
because I
you.
really love the work that you're doing. I'm so happy
Mm-hmm.
that we were able to chat today and share all these nuggets with people that are interested in emotional intelligence and the human condition
That's right.
and conflict resolution. It's really not that bad once you know how to do it, once you know how to engage in it, and once you start focusing on that need instead of the behavior. Oh, he's making me
Right.
so mad. Nobody's making you mad. You feel
Right.
angry.
Exactly.
And so why is that? Oh, there's a coded message going on there. So yes, any of these tools I think are great for parents as well because their children are triggering them and challenging them and bringing out emotions and the quicker they're able to understand what the needs are of their children, the more harmony they're going to have in their families.
No, exactly. Well, again, I think the reality of life is that conflict is inevitable. I think that's one of the
Hmm.
hard sort of things that we sort of appreciate. But I think what you're also pointing to, saying it may be inevitable, but it doesn't have to be this horror show. If there's by doing some simple little things, and I think the other point that you really were emphasizing just a moment ago is saying once you get this idea or understand that when people are in conflict, it's about their unmet needs. And if you can
Hmm.
refocus on that, it's a game changer. It
Hmm.
really there are
Yeah.
solutions, but then again, I think the other key insight that we've shared today is saying, yes, you want to focus on needs to problem solve, but I always like to say you need to earn the right to do that. And the way you earn the right to do that is by honoring the human experience that you've had and the other person's had by just literally allowing each to express how they've
Hmm.
been impacted and how what they're feeling. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Go on.
I look forward to our continued work together.
Yes, thank you. I look, me too.
Um,
And
yeah,
thank you for
and
what you do in the world.
yeah. All right. So I look forward to hearing responses from people watching this podcast. I know they're going to be super excited. Thank you for
Great.
taking the time to do this with me today.
Thank you.